If you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. And if your image of God doesn't measure up with Jesus, you need a new image of God, because Jesus is the exact image of what God is like.
We believe that Jesus is the ultimate solution. Our belief is that Jesus is the antidote. He is the Savior. He is the solution. He is the hero. He is the big idea.
Jesus shows up on the scene and he lets everybody know, I am the bread of life. You need to know I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the vine. I am the light of the world. I am the resurrection and the life. I am God, is what he was saying.
Well, good morning, everyone. Well, you look good. I know I do. I heard someone say it, and I've just been wanting to say that. You look good. You sound even better. Sound like you're singing from like an experiential knowledge of God and not just a head knowledge of God. It seems like you've experienced the acceptance of God coming into your life, knocking down walls and tearing down lies, and you accepting His definition of you. That's good stuff. Amen. Well, last week I showed you a couple of images of what people have painted or re-imaged what they thought Jesus would look like. And little did I know, there was one of those images which Richard Neve went with some forensic scientists to Jerusalem, and they had access to 3 skulls that they found that would be dated around Jesus' time. And so they took measurements of the skulls, and they did everything forensics do to come up with a recreation of what they thought Jesus would look like, 5'6". And this is, there's the image, but what I didn't know at the time was that we actually have someone on staff that's a Jesus lookalike. And someone brought that to my attention, and I just wanted you to see that our very own Zach Stelly looks like Jesus. On staff at Praise Church, we have like a stunt double of Jesus. So you know what that means, right? Jimmy, you know what that means? We get to bring back the cantata. We get to bring back the cantata with the drama. Y'all didn't do cantatas back in your day where they did the choir with the drama on Christmas and Easter's. Those were called cantatas. So now that we have a Jesus lookalike inside the church, we can actually bring back these dramas. And Zach Stelly can be our Jesus. All right. That's Jesus ball-headed. All right. Well, let me remind you of the distinction of our series. The series that we're on, this is the 5th week, is called simply called Jesus. And there's so many different directions with the title like that. I mean, think of how many different directions that we could go and avenues that we could study about Jesus. But here's the nuance, here's the distinction of the series. We're not just looking at what Jesus did, even though we are, but not just looking at what he did. We're looking at the most important thing. Why did he do what he did? One looks at the hand, behavior. The other looks at the heart. So we're simply saying we know what Jesus did. We would love to be like Jesus and act like Jesus. But the most important thing that we believe is to have the heart of Jesus. Because if you have the heart, you'll have the behavior. We're not just looking at behavioral modification. We're just saying Jesus came for heart transformation. Right? And as children, we're taught to behave. We're taught to monitor our behavior. And so we, therefore, bring that along with our spirituality as well, thinking that if we're just behaving, we're doing the ethics of Christianity, that we're doing well. But we all know that you can do right things, but not have the right motive. Christianity is way more than behavior modification. Jesus did not give his life so that we could act towards, good things. And acting is good. You hear WWJD, what would Jesus do? That's fine, but it's more important than what would Jesus do. What was it inside of him? What did he see? What did he think? What did he feel? What was the worldview perspective that when he saw life and he saw reality, what did he see? Because what he saw and what he believed is why he did what he did. So we're not just saying we're trying to replicate Jesus' behavior. We're trying to find out what was Jesus' heart and pursue the heart of Jesus, or we can say the heart of God. Because if you have the heart, you're going to do what he did. So last week, we looked specifically at why Jesus lovingly interacted with people like he did. In all contexts, You think about all the contexts that you interact with another person. When every context you read about, it's like when I read about Jesus, I'm going like, wow, he responded incredibly well in that conversation. Like, I mean, how did he think of that? Like, that was genius to come back with that question to his question. Or why did he do what he did? That was genius. So for every context that he had with people, he didn't just do something that was good, he did what was right. And there is a difference. He did, you just look at, you read about it, you go, man, that was just amazing. That was right. Because here's what we said. When Jesus saw people, that's what he saw. People. You was like, well, I do too. Well, I don't know. I think we ought to have some humility about us, because I'm telling you, I don't always do this. There's a lot of growing space for me. Is that when I see people, sometimes I see categories. The category overrides the person. I interact according to the category, not to the person. So when Jesus sees someone that's irreligious, no, he sees a person. He doesn't see someone that was irreligious or religious. How about you? Sinner, saint. Educated, uneducated. Ethnicity, color, skin, history, good history, bad history. Samaritan lady. He doesn't see these things. What he does see is a person. And so in working through this and trying to grow through this, I thought the other day, and I found myself that, I took my wife on a hot date. I think it was last week sometimes. We went to Walmart. No, I'm joking. When you get married, that becomes your hot date. No, we went out to eat. We were sitting there, and the waitress came up. And so I just said to myself, and I would love for you to do this. In fact, just like an exercise for you. That when you have interaction with people, ask yourself, how am I interacting with this person according to what definition? So when she came up, I said, either I can see her as a waitress, my interaction can be with her as me, customer to a waitress, or it could be me as a person to a person. And you think, well, what difference does that make? It makes a big difference. Because if I'm only seeing her as a waitress, then my response is going to be to what type of job she's doing for me. Is she doing a good job? Well, I'm going to respond favorably. If she's not. So I had to decide, am I going to see this lady as a waitress that happens to be a person? Or is she a person that happens to be a waitress? What am I going to identify her as most? Is she a person? Because if I see her as a person instead of a waiter, then I'm going to identify with her as maybe that she has intrinsic worth, not that her worth is based upon her role. It makes a big difference. I mean, and however you relate, like, do you see your child's teacher as your child's teacher or as a person? So what if your child's teacher does something and comes in in a bad mood? Are we thinking, well, that's not good for my kid? Or are we thinking maybe something happened at home? Maybe they're hurting deeply. Because whatever we choose to interact, or whatever role or category we choose to interact with someone, is how we're going to respond to them. What about your spouse? Wife, husband, or person? Person. What about your ex? You're like, well, let's go on for that. Let's think about something different. Anybody that's different than you. See, Jesus saw people as people, and so his interaction with them was driven and influenced by intrinsic value from God, not by some category. It didn't nuance the way that he was treating people. Because of that, he was consistent in being very life-giving to everyone. And I think we could all identify. I think you can identify, I know I can, that we've all been treated a certain way at times, or we felt like other people were thinking something about us because of a category that they were placing us in. And we felt that. Maybe it was a body image deal. Maybe it was a skin deal, an ethnicity deal. Maybe it was an educated, maybe it was some economic deal or a job title. And you knew that when you were there, people were thinking something and they were treating you differently because they put you in a category. And they didn't see you as a person. They saw you as something else. And because they saw you as something else, that was what ruled the relationship with you. You said, that's just not right. But it's normal. Thinking categorically is normal. Just try yourself when you leave out of here. Thinking categorically is normal. So don't be normal. Jesus wasn't normal. He was countercultural. So follow the lead of Jesus, because categories, they become barriers to interaction with people. They can become barriers to us having compassion for people. There are barriers to us walking a mile in someone else's shoe. There are barriers to us serving, to us honoring people. Because categories are prescriptive, meaning they are prescripts. Prescripts, a category is a prescript, meaning that before, a category is before you act out on it, it tells you there's a prescript or written out thing for you to do based upon what you've placed that person in. So if we think this person is one way, then we respond to the script of that category. Let me give you an example. I was having lunch with a friend this week. We were catching up, hadn't been with each other for a while. And we were just talking about, just life. And he said, man, I went to a football game this past year, and he named a pretty prestigious school here in Texas. And he told me who he went with, and it was someone here that occupies a high social status in Beaumont. And he said, man, if you ever want to get treated differently, you need to go to a game with him. He said, we rolled up. He said, everybody moved out of the way. They were bringing us things. They were going out of their way to show, just to accommodate him. And I thought, well, that's great if you're him. But this is an example. It doesn't matter what category, whether it's good or bad, we respond to people based upon a category. But when we do that, we allow categories to give the intrinsic value or worth opposed to just the person. So what if they don't measure up? Are we still going to give value? If we want not only to do what Jesus did, but to be like Jesus, we're going to have to see people as people and not as categories. I mentioned last week the saying that there has never been anyone that you've locked eyes with that's not valuable to God. And if they're valuable to God, they should be valuable to you. There's never been anyone that you've ever locked eyes with that isn't valuable to God. And if they're valuable to God, they should be valuable to you. So let's look at a few stories about Jesus and how some people saw a category, removed themselves from interaction where Jesus did not see a category and saw a person, and that caused him to run to their side. These are incredible stories about Jesus. Luke 19, 1-7 says, he, meaning Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. So immediately, I'm sure you know about Zacchaeus. Maybe you've heard about Zacchaeus because Zacchaeus was you heard about Zacchaeus. He was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. So this shows you right here. So Scripture doesn't say he was a wee little man. It actually goes right here and says that he was small in stature. But here's how we are so good at putting people in categories that we will take Scripture and say, Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Now listen, that doesn't sound bad until your wife refers to you as a wee little man. No one wants to be referred to as I married a wee little man. Oh, thanks. So this example here, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. Here's a category, and this is why some people weren't with him. But Jesus was with him. He was a tax collector, and he was rich. And really, that should be flipped. He was rich because he was a tax collector, and that's just why he was rich. But those are two categories right there, tax collector and rich. So per those categories, people are going to respond to him in certain ways. And it shows us right here in the text. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not see because he was, now Luke gets it right. He didn't say, come on. He was small in stature. Now, we can live with that. Next. So he ran on ahead. He climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and he said to Zacchaeus, hurry, come down. I'm going to stay at your house today. So he hurried, and he came down and received him joyfully. Now, when they saw it, we don't even have to talk about who they were. All we can say is that they had a category. When they saw it, they all grumbled, and they said, he, Jesus, has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. So it's obvious in this story that there's some people that saw Zacchaeus in certain categories, so therefore you don't interact with Zacchaeus, where Jesus didn't see Zacchaeus as a tax collector or being rich or anything else or a wee little man. He saw him as a person, so he went in and interacted with him. This is an example of categories creating barriers. I mean, Jesus could have said to them, here's what they said. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And Jesus could have said, yeah, he is a sinner, just like you. He just sins differently than you. And so, ooh. Because we can all identify with being broken, dinged, not as we should be. Luke 7:36 is another story. One of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him. He went into the Pharisee's house. He reclined at the table. And behold, a woman of the city, that's Luke being really nice, who was a sinner, when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping. Now you look at this, standing behind him at his feet, weeping. And if that was happening in here right now, if someone right now was just started weeping, someone weep for, no, I'm joking. If someone was weeping in here right now, we would go like, what's wrong? What's wrong with the poor man? What's wrong with the poor lady? We need to offer some help. So here they are standing at his feet, weeping. She began to wet his feet with her tears. She wiped them with the hair of her head. That would really get our attention. And she kissed his feet and anointed them with the ointment. Now, surely everyone in the house would have had compassion upon this lady, because there's obviously something wrong going on right now. She's hurting. It says, now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man was a prophet, look what he's thinking about. If this man was a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is and who's touching him. She's a sinner. I'm just trying to show you, categories create barriers. Where for this person here, she was a sinner, therefore you don't have interaction. Now Jesus is not seeing her as a sinner, seeing her as a person. And you say, well, Greg, are you saying that Jesus is ignoring sin? Absolutely not. He always brought grace and truth to the table, to every interaction. It just means it didn't stop him from interacting, because the category did not drive the relationship. What drove his perspective of people was that they were a person. I mentioned earlier that categories are barriers, and they are. They're mental barriers. They're emotional barriers. We don't feel what other people feel when we have them in categories. They're spiritual barriers. We don't walk, have compassion, walk miles with people when we're separated from them in our minds. These barriers prevent us from entering into the life of other people. So think about it like this. Categories on people are boxes without doors. So you put a box or four walls around a person, and there's no way, no entrance inside of that, because the category is ruling the interaction. Therefore, the categories are going to prevent us from feeling the needs, the hurts of other people, because there's no way for us to get in there, because the category is stopping us from entering into their humanity and realizing that they are a person too. No, they're not a person to us. That is a person. No. They're a person that happens to be whatever category you want to place them in. Because Jesus saw people as people, not a category, he was able to have compassion on them. So I could share many scriptures that talk about Jesus having compassion upon people. I want to show a couple here. It says Matthew 9:35, and Jesus went through all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom. He's healing every disease and every affliction. And when he saw the crowds, what did he see? When he saw the crowds, I say, when you see the crowds, when you're out in public and you see people, you're at the mall, what do you see? When you see the crowds. And when he saw the crowds, well, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. I would say, why would Jesus able to have compassion and see people, the crowds, with compassion? Because he didn't see them in categories. He saw them as people, inherently valuable. Matthew 20, verse 29, and as they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed him. And behold, there were two blind men sitting at the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. What does the crowd do? I mean, can you even imagine that this would happen? The crowd rebuked them, the two blind men. Be silent. But they cried out all the more, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. And stopping, Jesus called them and said, what do you want me to do for you? And they said, Lord, let our eyes be open. And Jesus, in pity, in compassion, touched their eyes, and immediately they recovered their sight and followed him. Why is there a group of people? Look, you've got two different people. Why is there a group of people that's saying, hey, be quiet? Because they were defined by being blind, not being people. Beggars, people who were trying to stop Jesus' progress. Now, why did Jesus stop? Why did Jesus enter in? Because he didn't have a box around that person that had no doors. No, they were completely open because they were a person. But the moment that we say, oh, this person is this, and it's prescriptive. There are scripts that we have to follow based upon what we've learned or what culture tells us. We see people as people. The script is that you're created in the image of God. You're valuable. And Jesus has come to give you life. And when we see that you hurt and I hurt and we share humanity together, we may be different, but there's a lot of things that we share in common. And I could go on with stories about Jesus having compassion upon lepers, the no-touch-ems that lived in colonies. People that are supposed to be no-see-ems in culture. The Samaritan lady we talked about last week, don't talk to her for many different reasons. Jesus didn't see that. He had compassion. Jesus is at the tomb with Mary and Martha, and he says, the shortest scripture in the Bible, Jesus wept. He had compassion. He had compassion on children when everybody else was shoving the children aside. Hey, the children are bugging Jesus. Come on. Let them. No. Jesus didn't see children. He saw a person. So what does he do? Come on. Let the kids come to me. We have to ask ourselves, we're not just trying to replicate what Jesus did, but why did he do that? And that's what we're trying to pursue. How did he see these children? How did he see the Samaritan lady? How did he see the lepers? Why is it that some people were rushing away from people and just like, what is going on? Why is not somebody doing something? Because there's going to be a moment this week when there's going to be an opportunity for you to interact with people. And there's going to be something that says, no. Social mores says this. Rules say this. Your religion has taught you this. Religion is laws. I'm not speaking well of the word religion right now. Religion has said to do this. My family has told me to do this. This crowd, obviously, right now is telling me to do this. But I'm just going to say, why don't you ask yourself, how am I viewing them? As a waiter or as a person? As someone that's a teacher or someone that is a person? The mail lady or a person? The trash collector or a person that's going home and has feelings and humanity? The person behind the counter that's a clerk or a person? Your wife or a person? You're going to have many opportunities to be able to see that, because when God sees them, they are a person that happens to be whatever category we want to place them in. The word compassion actually comes from this Greek word. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I'll let you do that. It's a compound word. Compassion. Con means with. Passion means great love and pity. Compassion is to have, is to be with great love and great pity. Now, how in the world are you going to get that? You know what it actually means? The Greeks, or the idiom is that to have compassion is to be moved, listen to this, moved from the bowels. Anybody's ever had your bowels moved? Oh, that's a conversation for your doctor. Listen, moved from your bowels. We understand this. It was a Jewish idiom, meaning having deep compassion, that I was moved to my bowels. Deep compassion. Have you ever heard something and you said, oh, I feel sick to my stomach? Someone called with the news, and all of a sudden you had this sick feeling in your gut. You were moved with compassion. You felt it in your bowels. You felt it in the pit of your stomach. That's what compassion means. It means but it makes you go beyond that. You're not just feeling pity, oh, I'm so sorry for that person. What it means is that you hear or you see, you identify with their plight, with their need, and that plight almost becomes your own, like you have experienced it yourself. And you know that when that happens, there's nothing that you wouldn't do for that person because you identify with their pain. But here's what I'm trying to get us to see, that if we have people in categories, we will never be able to enter in their humanity because we're always dealing with something that stands before their humanity. But if we could say, get rid of categories, I've never locked eyes with anyone in this room that isn't valuable to God. And if they are valuable to God, they better be valuable to me. And if I could see someone as a person that is incredibly valuable to God, I interact as a person, as an image bearer of God. So I respond with intrinsic value. And now you begin to enter in, you feel their hurts, you feel their needs. Now, there is an exception to this in that when tragedy happens or there's natural disasters, then that automatically helps us see people without categories. Now, it's kind of proven for us because we drop categories when very bad things happen to people. For example, Hurricane Harvey. No one's asking the question, what category are you in before I help you? I mean, people are coming to our neighborhood and they're boating people out, not asking anything, not caring their age, not caring their race or their gender, not caring about anything else other than you've experienced something terrible in your life and I want to help you. Because what we're doing is a tragedy finally helps us see humanity. It helps us, for some reason, it exaggerates and it emphasizes someone's hurt. But why can't we see that hurt without tragedy? Because can't we all identify that we all go through these things? We don't need tragedy to accentuate our problems. We have those. So Hurricane Harvey, you got people helping others that they haven't even met them. With different people, different types of people helping different people that they have no regular interaction with. Why? Because we identify with the need. This guy right here, Don Ritchie. This is a picture of Don Ritchie. He lives in Sydney, Australia. This is at a place called The Gap. And The Gap in Sydney, Australia is the notorious suicide place of Australia. That's what it's known for. It's known that once a week, someone will attempt to commit suicide by climbing over that barrier and jumping down the cliff. Don Ritchie lives nearby. And for 50 years, he's passed away now, but for 50 years, Don Ritchie has sat in his house with binoculars, watching for anybody that would be close to that fence. His family says that he says that he's saved over 160 people over these years. His family says that he's saved over 500. Anytime that he would see someone approach that fence, he would race down to them, and he would say, "Hey, would you like to come to my house for a cup of tea?" And 160 people took him up on that. Don said that he could not just stand by and watch this without doing something about it. See, tragedy helps us feel the humanity of others. But why does it have to take tragedy to get us to remove categories? Because we're all experiencing things on the inside. And if you experience that, you want to relate to people, just go back and remember what it was like to grieve. Remember what it's like to feel lost and lonely and mad and taken advantage of and rejected. Because if you can identify with your own humanity, you can also step in the humanity of other people. Don't rely on tragedy to make you respond like Jesus. Respond like Jesus without tragedy having to force us to do that. C.S. Lewis says, friendship is born at the moment when one man says to another, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one." So the children's nursery rhyme says, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. All the king's horses, the greatest of the world that he lived in, couldn't put him back together. And the good news for us is that we're all broken. We've all fallen. We're all dinged up. And the world can't put you back together. But there was a king that came to put you back together. And he was willing to enter into our humanity. with no category in between us and him. And because of that, he dealt with us as a person, not a category, not your history, not your failures, but just as a person that was made in the image of God. And because of that, he was willing to have categories placed on him that got him in trouble, like a liar and a demon-possessed person and a criminal. And because of that, he was placed in the category so that one day we didn't have to live defined by the world's categories, but defined by our God. Yeah. Yeah. So in Hebrews 4, it says it like this. Since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who is in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet he was without sin. So here's what we get to do. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. And because we have access to this, guess what? We get to do the same thing. We can't heal people. We can't solve their problems. I can't solve anybody's problems. But what I can do is come along somebody and help carry the load and help them see God, in some sense through my service. Amen.